Welcome to the Productivity Show, a podcast where we believe that you can get everything done without having to sacrifice your health, family, and things that matter to you. Hi, my name is Tam Pham. I'm the founder and CEO of Agent Efficiency, where we help people become more productive at work and in life. And today I'm joined by my co-host, Brooks Duncan. How are you today, Brooks?
I'm great. How are you?
I'm doing very well. I just finished working out. I'm feeling pretty alert right now. So I'm ready to kind of start talking about this new feature that Apple released in iOS 15 called Focus Mode. But this is not just for Apple users. Anyone that's listening right now, if you have Android or Windows, we're going to be covering some feature sets there as well. But because it's such a new thing, we thought we would talk about this new feature set because it might come in handy, right? So if you're listening to this and you feel like, you know what, I just heard about this focus mode, but I'm not sure what it is, we're going to walk you through what it is and how you can use it. And even if you don't use an iPhone or a Mac, don't worry, we've got you covered here as well. And some of you might be already using focus mode. So if that's you, we'll give you some other tips and strategies that can help you get the most out of it as well. And everything that we will talk about will be linked in the show notes. So don't worry if you miss something. You can always go to theproductivityshow.com/377. And as always, before we kick things off, we like to start off with our top three favorite resources. So Brooks, what do you have in store for us today?
All right. Tip number one is for people who use the Google Maps app, this on Android or iOS. And I found out through conversations, but a lot of people don't realize that it actually has an offline mode. You can download maps from in the Google Maps app so that it's there and available for you, even if you don't have an internet connection. I was just reading something where someone was giving tips about how you start the search when you're in cell service, and then you just make sure not to quit the app and all that sort of stuff. None of that's necessary. You just do your search and then scroll over to the right a little bit, and there's an offline button. And I just use this when I was in an area without mobile reception. I do it all the time. It works really, really well. And even if you're traveling somewhere and you don't have roaming, just download your maps first and you should be good to go. So that's tip number one. Tip number two is a Chrome keyboard shortcut. So I think most Chrome users probably know that to close a tab, you just do Command W on the Mac or Control W on Windows. And if you want to quit the app, of course, it's Command Q on the Mac and Control Q on Windows. However, what if you have multiple windows and you don't want to close the whole thing? You just want to close your one specific window and groups of tabs in that window without touching any of your other windows. Well, there's actually a keyboard shortcut for that. So on the Mac, you go Command-Shift-W, and that will close your window, your current window, leaving everything else alone. And if you're on Windows, it's Alt-F4. So I find this really handy if I'm doing research or something. I have a window open, but I don't want to mess up anything else. So that's the second tip. And the third tip is actually a tip from one of our dojo members, Joel. And he shared that he uses the official 3M Post-it app. So this is for people who like taking notes, jotting down ideas and things that come to them on a Post-it note. And so after that, you can use the official 3M Post-it app. Is available for Android and iOS. And you can capture those Post-its and then send them to Dropbox, Trello, Evernote, export it to PDF. There's a bunch of different things you can do with it. So if you're a Post-it user, check out the Post-it Note app. Joel finds it really helpful. I know a lot of other people do.
Awesome. Thank you, Brooks, for sharing the three resources here. And let's start diving into the content of today, which is all about focus mode. So Brooks, Apple released this new feature in iOS 15 called Focus, or as some people like to call it, Focus Mode, and we'll just call it Focus Mode just because it's a little simpler to refer to. But can you explain to people what this feature is?
Yeah, so Focus or Focus Mode, I agree with calling it that way, is a feature that came out in iOS 15, like you said, also macOS Monterey. So it's going to be available for the Mac as well. And it basically what it does is it allows you to filter out notifications and apps and calls and texts and all that sort of stuff based on what you want to focus on right now. So do not disturb mode has been available for a long time on different platforms. And I was a heavy user of that. I know you are too, Tan. Well, what focus mode allows you to do is tailor your notifications and the things that happen, your distractions, to the different areas of your life. So you could have like a work focus mode, a personal focus mode, a driving focus mode, and you can create your own custom ones. And we're going to get into all of that. But basically, it allows you to really contextualize the distractions that you allow through. One interesting feature that I personally turned off is you can also automatically let people know when you are in these focus modes. So if somebody, say, gives you a text or something like that, it will automatically send them a message back saying, oh, I'm currently busy, try again later, that sort of thing. I personally have that turned off. So it's an interesting feature. Some people really, really like it. Some people don't. You basically use it like the do not disturb feature of previous versions. It's however you enabled that before, focus mode is in the same place. And we record these episodes live with our Dojo members and our TPS Plus members. And Giacomo says an interesting thing, which I like. He says, thanks to focus mode, I figured out how easy it was for me to get distracted just by a banner or a notification, or even just like a status message or something like that, the status badge. And we don't really realize how distracted we can get by these little things. And by using focus mode, it allows us to eliminate all that stuff. And this is really, really important because distractions are just such a big attention killer. You know, we always talk about the three main levers of productivity. You've got time, you've got energy, you've got attention. We call it the T framework. You can learn more about that at theproductivityshow.com/T. And like Giacomo just said, your ability to focus really impacts that attention lever the most. And all these little distractions and things that we let in just chip away at that attention. And so that's a big stool, three-legged stool that gets wobbly when these distractions come through. So this is a simple feature in a lot of ways, but it can have a really, really big impact if you use it well.
Okay, so I think for those of you who are listening, you might be going, okay, this sounds great. Thank you, Apple. What about, me? I'm an Android user or I use Windows. Like, what about me?
Yeah, so we're going to be talking about features that are specifically in iOS and Mac OS. So we are specifically going to be diving into the Apple pool a little bit today, but there are similar-ish features on Windows and Android. So on Windows, way back starting with Windows 10, there's a feature called Focus Assist, and it's kind of similar. On Windows 10, you just go to the Action Center in the taskbar, and there's a Focus Assist button. In Windows 11, it's in your Quick Settings panel, and basically it allows you to set different modes. There's priority only, there's alarms only, or of course having all the distractions and notifications off. And you can do some interesting things. You can have it automatically turn on when you plug in an external display or other things. You can even go a little further and you can have it so that when you turn on this Focus Assist, it automatically will let you choose a task in Microsoft To Do to focus on. You can even automatically start a Spotify playlist, and you can set how long you want Focus Assist to be on, and then you can have a summary of what you missed at the end. So that's Focus Assist on Windows. So if you're a Windows user, check that out. On Android, there's a focus mode as part of their digital well-being. So you can have apps that you select as distracting to be blocked when that focus mode is on. And it also has a cool feature where you can have totally work and personal profiles. And so similar to what we're going to be talking about with iOS, I'm sure some people would say iOS was maybe inspired by this feature of Android. But what you can do is you can have it hide the apps and other distractions when you flip between those different modes. So there's work and personal. So something similar exists on Android as well. So Android and Windows do have good focus features and have for quite a while, but we're really going to be focusing for the rest of the episode on 3 ways that you can use focus mode to have more attention on iOS and macOS.
Cool. Let's just start diving into it. I know you've been playing with it ever since it came out. I've been doing the same thing as well. So we're going to be sharing some of our experiences here and tips and strategies that you can use here today. And Brooks, yeah, let's just kick it off and start sharing.
All right. So tip number 1 of ways you can use focus mode is and maybe it will sound obvious, but to think up the different modes that you want to use. So how do you want to use this feature? Before you even get into the granularity, what are your main kind of focuses that you want to have? And by default, it includes a focus mode for personal, it includes a focus mode for work, and it includes one for sleep. And maybe just those three might be good enough for you, or maybe you want to just stay with a tried and true do not disturb. That's fine too. That's still there. But you may have other activities where you want to have specific settings. So maybe you want to have a specific meetings focus that's different from work. Maybe you want to have a focus block focus mode set up for when you're doing deep work, or maybe you want to call it deep work. For us, maybe we want to have a podcast focus mode. That could be an obvious one. Chances are, if you're listening to this, you don't have a podcast, but maybe you have a similar situation where you do things where you don't want to be distracted. They actually have predefined settings for driving, fitness, gaming, which I find funny, mindfulness, and reading, but you can set up your own custom one. So that would be the first step I would recommend, is to just think at a high level what you want your different focuses to be. And then what you want to do is, for each focus, as they, like we said, they call it, set the specific people who are allowed to notify you when that focus is turned on. And of course, another option could be to have nobody able to notify you. So what you could do is you can have it set so maybe you want to have certain focus modes where only certain coworkers could call in, or only an important client, or only your family members, or something like that. There's this handy feature related to this where you can have it so that if somebody calls and it doesn't let the call come through because you have your focus mode on, if they call back within 3 minutes, then it does let them through. And you can turn this on and off for each mode, but that could be handy for family members. Maybe you might not let your significant other call you during a focus block. It's kind of cold, but maybe you're like super serious about your focus blocks. But if they call you right back, that's a sign that is probably something kind of important, so you should let it through. One thing I find weird about this is that you have to choose people one by one. There isn't like groups of people you can add. You just have to add people one by one. Then once you set the people who are able to come through, then you want to set the apps that can notify you during this block. So it's kind of like the inverse of what I was talking about with Android. With Android, you set the apps that you find distracting. It's the other way with these focus blocks, which I actually like it this way better, where you specifically select the apps that you want to let through. So maybe if you're in a true focus block, you don't want any apps notifying you. Maybe if you're on a personal focus, maybe you don't want your Slack or your Teams or other work-related apps notifying you. But maybe on the flip side, if you are on, say, a work focus, maybe you don't want Instagram notifying you or something like that, but you do want Slack and Teams. So this kind of feature is really helpful for getting into the attention segmentation mindset. Now, how about you, Tan? I know there's a bunch of different focus modes that you can set. Have you kind of like settled on any that you've worked with, or what are you doing?
So when it first came out, I thought, okay, this sounds like a really good feature. And when I got iOS 15, I installed it the day it came out as a non-beta, and I was like, okay, I have it on my iPad, I have it on my iPhone. Great, let's play around with this, right? So the first thing you'll notice when you open up your phone is when you look at the different modes, it has all these predefined that you want, the ones that you just mentioned, and you have to kind of like set it up in the beginning so that you kind of customize it, right? So out of the box, the only way it really works in a way that's convenient for you is you either have D&D or you don't have it on whatsoever, right? And most of us have used D&D for a while. I definitely have. And the settings just carried over to the next iOS version as well. So if you had a particular setting in for D&D, like the scheduling stuff, where you say, hey, between 9 p.m. and 7 a.m., like I have it, don't disturb me. That's something that's turned on automatically for me every single day. And so as I started to set up like the work and the gaming and like the different ways, and you can create custom ones with like, a custom name and like a little icon and stuff like that. the more I started to set it up, the more I felt like, oh, this could be really confusing because now it's like work, then it's personal. But if you work from home, like I do, work and personal are very intertwined in many ways. And I can see how if you, for example, go to the office, work can be done between certain times of the day, like especially if you say clock in at 9 a.m. and clock out at 5 p.m. Right? Then you can set it in a specific way because then you can say, hey, only show me like screen number one and screen number two, and those are maybe only the apps that you might use during your work hours and stuff, right? But since I work from home, everything that I do is kind of like on my own time, and whether it's work or personal, it's kind of intertwined. Like between let's say 8 and 11, it might be work stuff, but every now and then I might grab a taco or something during quote unquote my personal time or whatever, or go ride my bike. And so my schedule is kind of like flexible in that sense. And what I've found is the more modes I set up, the more analysis paralysis I had when it comes to figuring out like what's the setting that I need to use right now. Because my life is actually relatively simple in that sense, where before this feature came out, all I needed was D&D. And if I wanted to go extremely like an extra step further, I would just set it to airplane mode or just turn it off altogether, right? And so I think what helped me kind of like make the focus part relatively easy is to say, I'm going to turn off all notifications for all apps and then turn them on one by one as I need them or want them, right? And so my app notifications in general are very tamed in that sense. And I can see how focus mode could be very helpful for those who have not tamed their notifications and kind of want to do it the opposite route where everything is turned on and then use focus mode to kind of like filter by context or by mode to see the notifications that they do want to see, right? Because there is this one feature where you have like a summary notification where it can show you, this is kind of more of a iOS setting where you can get a summary of all notifications of particular apps summarized. And that could be helpful in certain focus modes as well. But I find, and this is, again, I'm not trying to be controversial or anything, but for me, it's an overrated feature because all I need is D&D. And as I'm focusing and putting my phone in a different room, whatever, or even as I'm podcasting right now, I don't want to be disturbed. And all I need is D&D for that. I don't have to have a specific mode for that, right? And the nuance between like gaming and focus and personal can be so subtle that it's oftentimes not even worth tweaking the minor settings for me.
You heard it here first. Grandpa Tan says that focus mode is overrated. No, but I do definitely can see this being a trap and being something that leads people down a fiddly path, where I can see a lot of us when we start using this feature just go wild, setting up a bunch of different focuses for 10 different or whatever the max is, different scenarios, and like tweaking and doing stuff like that, which is that if you're somebody who's into that sort of thing and that is an enjoyable use of your time, that's totally great. We're definitely not saying not to do it, but make sure, like you said, that the differences aren't so subtle that having different focus modes don't actually do too much for you. I mean, personally, right now I have personal work podcasts, and I'm playing with a nap focus mode too. But really, like anything else with technology that we recommend, make sure what you're doing is being intentional. And it's these different focus modes that you're setting up are actually doing something that will impact your life and impact your work. Otherwise, you're just fiddling, which again, if that's a hobby for you, awesome. But if not, make sure you're being intentional.
I will add that if you use this on your iPad, and your iPad is like one of your main ways of getting work done, then I can really see the value of it. Because on the phone, like I usually use my phone as kind of like a utility. It kind of is as needed, or when I'm taking a break or something. But it's not really a machine or a device that I use for working on stuff, right? Whereas if I was a writer on my iPad, for example, and I was writing articles and newsletters, and I spent like 3-4 hours a day on my iPad doing work, then I can see how the focus mode could be really helpful, because then you can really tame the notifications as needed. And then also customize your home screens as well and say, hey, if I'm working on my iPad, if I'm writing, I only want to see this app available in front of me, and maybe one more thing, and that's it, right? Um, so I can see how that could be more helpful, and especially on Mac OS as well, when that is there, because I haven't upgraded to Monterey, so I haven't really used it in that sense. But I can see how, okay, if you're in podcast mode, like you can have certain settings turned on or turned off. So I can see how that could be more powerful. But if you're just using it on the phone, I personally think it's overrated.
All right. Well, this is a really great episode for this is a really great episode for us to have our TPS Plus members and Dojo members in the live stream, because we're getting a lot of features and a lot of suggestions for focus mode. So we'll make sure to weave those into the episode. If you want to learn more about TPS Plus, which is our special kind of upgraded version of the productivity show, where you get episodes a week early, you get episodes with no ads, and you get access to the live stream and the show notes. You can learn more about that at theproductivityshow.com/plus. And one thing that Giacomo in the live stream says is one feature that he loves about focus mode is that you can customize app and widget pages based on the focuses that you're using. And that is perfectly leading into tip number 2, which is to customize your screens. So we've been talking a lot about focus modes and notifications and letting calls through and all that sort of stuff. But it's about a lot more than that. You can also control how your device looks and works, of course, to a certain extent. So on iOS, you can set it to hide notification badges for different modes. So you can have that big red badge turned off if you go into a focus mode. But I think the big win and the cool feature is a setting they call custom pages. And Tan, you touched on this a little earlier, where you can have it so that you can only see certain pages of apps on certain modes. So you could have your work mode only show the apps that you use at work, and you don't even get distracted by Instagram, Facebook, Twitter, all that sort of stuff. On the flip side, you could have your personal focus set up so you don't see Slack or Teams or whatever your CRM system is. It can just have really hard delineations between what you even see on your device. So it goes beyond notifications. You don't even see the apps. You could have a focus block or a deep work mode set up. One thing Giacomo said, which I thought was cool, is when he has his deep focus mode turned on his phone, it shows no apps at all, just a big clock on the page with the timers. So that is like going extreme with, with focus mode. So these are the sorts of things you can do. And you can start to see the power of this beyond just do not disturb mode if you're somebody who would benefit for you. The only thing about this is it will definitely take some rethinking about how you have your apps pages set up. I'm sure most of us right now don't have like a personal page, a work page, a deep work page. So you do need to do a little bit of work to set those pages up the way you want it. But I can see how for some people, especially people who are easily distracted by even just seeing an app, this could be a interesting feature. As far as I know, this is only for iOS, even on macOS Monterey, even on macOS Monterey, it's not like you change your mode and your dock changes or your desktop changes or anything like that. I don't think that is going to be there for Mac OS. I'm happy to be corrected, but you can do that on iOS for sure. Another thing it can do is you can have your lock screen dim, and you can control whether notifications show up on your lock screen. So you can go to the extent where if you go into like some sort of focus mode or something, it can actually like dim, or a nap mode, you can dim your entire lock screen so that you could have a timer going, but don't have anything else going. So it's kind of an interesting feature. I haven't really got into using it very much, to be totally honest, because I'm not a big launch apps from my screens person. Generally, if I'm going to launch an app, it will be through search. So I haven't found a huge amount of use from this feature yet, but I can definitely see how some people might be really into it. How about you, Tan? Have you been playing with or using this feature?
When I was playing around with it, I tried to use it on my iPhone, and yeah, I think the home screen can be helpful in how you change stuff and have custom pages and stuff. But not to play devil's advocate here for Giacomo here, but as an example, if you're not really using your phone when you're in focus mode, like why even bother having a clock on there? Because I would say, just turn off your phone and just get to work, right? So I feel like if you're just using this on the iPhone, it's really not that powerful. And I'm going to probably get a lot of flack for that when I say that. However, if you use it on the iPad, and again, you use it as a working machine, then I can see how it could be really helpful, because then you can, for example, if you just see yourself as a writer and you need to focus on writing, then only having pages set up where you have your writing apps and stuff like that, great, right? And make sure no notifications get shown up and distract you and stuff like that, right? So then, okay, I can see how it can be useful. But if you have to focus and just be not disturbed, just put your phone away or just put it on airplane mode and you're good to go. Like then by the time you get back to your phone, you can address all the things that need to be done, right? So one setting that might be helpful is to set expectations with others. So like you kind of briefly mentioned at the very beginning, you can set a focus status or a status, just like how you have in Slack, you can set it so that you're busy, right? So people know like, oh, Brooks has a busy icon there, so he's probably working on something. You can set the same thing here and say, hey, if I have this focus mode on, then in messages it will show as people are about to text you that I have a focus mode on, so that you might want to temper your expectation in terms of when I get back to you, right? So something like that might be helpful, but generally, like I personally don't need that. I never set the expectation for people to expect a prompt reply when they message me over messages or anything like that. So I typically don't have to use that. If people get a text from me 5 minutes after a reply or 3 hours, like there's no difference there. I don't have to set those expectations with people, but I can see for some that might be very helpful. And so that's where it could be handy, where you set that, focus mode status for others for them to know. So if you're like, especially messaging and texting a lot of people, like I can see how can that be really helpful. But if you're like a lone wolf and you're just like, need to get your stuff done and you're not really doing it on your phone, I think it's, again, not really much needed.
Phil in the live stream makes a good point. He says, it seems it would work best if you could set it once across devices. And that is definitely something I should have mentioned earlier, which is one cool thing about this is that these settings do propagate across your devices. So if you set focus mode, say to podcast on one of your iPhones, it will also put your iPad and your Mac into the podcast focus mode as well. So that's something pretty cool that it does go across your different devices. And speaking of that, we might as well roll right into tip number 3, which is to control how your focus modes start. So of course you can start and stop focus modes manually using Control Center, just the way if any of you have used Do Not Disturb mode, which most people probably have, you go into your Control Center, turn on Do Not Disturb. It's the same thing. You go into your Control Center, you tap the exact same button actually, but now you can choose your different focus modes if you want, or still use Do Not Disturb. And you can start it manually and turn it off manually, or you can have it run for an hour until this evening, or even until you leave your current location. So that's kind of an interesting feature. I don't have a place in my life for that, but I could see how that could be handy for some people. But the real power comes from the ability to automatically start your different focus modes. So you may not be aware that you can do this, but you can start it and stop it automatically at different times and different days. So you could start your work focus every day during the workday. You could maybe start a fitness focus during the time you normally go jogging. You could start a meeting focus for your weekly team meeting, something like that. So you can automatically start and stop different modes at different times and on different days. So that's kind of interesting. You can also start and stop it based on location. So you could start the fitness focus when you arrive at your gym, and then maybe it will turn off when you leave. Or you could start your client work focus when you arrive at a client site, and then again, when you leave, it goes off. Or you could start the personal focus when you arrive home from work in the evening, something like that. So give some thought to the different ways you might be able to tie locations into your focusing. Another thing you can do is you can start and stop it when you're using specific apps. So you could, for example, start the mindfulness focus mode when you start the Calm or Headspace app. If you're using the mindfulness app on your Apple Watch, there's actually a built-in integration with that to start and stop it. You could say start a reading focus mode when you're using the Kindle app or something like that. So you can start tying these different focus modes to the things you're already doing based on when you're using different apps. Now, that's kind of like the level 1 stuff for working with focus modes, but you can actually go to like a pretty nerdy level with this stuff. So this is kind of like our advanced stuff. Advanced settings for focus mode, but you can actually start and stop focus modes using shortcuts. So if you use shortcuts, which is a great and super powerful iOS and soon macOS automation tool, you can actually use a set focus action to turn on or off a specific focus. So you could do something like maybe you had a researching focus mode. You could have a researching for 30 minutes shortcut that will like start a music playlist, set a timer, turn on your researching focus mode, and maybe like do some other things. So anywhere that you might have used shortcuts for iOS automation, you can trigger and start and stop focus modes with that as well. If you even want to go more automation-y, you can even have different shortcuts kick off when you set a specific focus mode. And that's under the personal automation section of the shortcuts app. And so what you could do is when you go into like your driving focus mode or your reading focus mode, let's say, as soon as you switch that focus mode, it could, and then you fire up the Kindle app, it could then like turn on your smart lights beside your reading chair and close the blinds and change your Apple Watch face. Like you can do a bunch of different things automatically when you start and stop different focus modes. Again, this is getting like pretty up there, but I just wanted to introduce you to the fact that if you are somebody who wants to dabble in iOS and soon macOS automation, there can be a lot of power there with your focus modes. Tan, I know you said you aren't really into doing too many different focus modes. You're mainly rolling with DND right now. How do you do DND? Do you manually turn it on or off, or how do you do that?
No, I actually have it automated. So between 9 p.m. and 7 a.m. is when I have it scheduled, where nothing can kind of come through. So the only exception, this is kind of the setting that was before even iOS 15 was there, is that if someone was on the favorites list and they called me multiple times, they would still go through, right? Or even if they were on the favorites list and they called me, they would go through. And that's kind of still there. So if I'm sleeping and someone really needs me, like call me or call me multiple times and it will go through eventually. So I think of maybe in the last few years, the number of times that has happened is maybe one time, maybe. So I'm very fortunate not to have any craziness happen while I'm sleeping. So that's the only way I really use it. I think if you're just using it on the phone, there's very minimal value to it, but I can see I might change my tune when I upgrade to Monterey, and if I ever use my iPad for like anything work or functional. But considering my context, like I have the MacBook Pro here as a main computer. I have a MacBook Air that I use for travel or when I'm sitting on the couch or something, and I have an iPad that I kind of use for consuming media and stuff like that whenever I need to kind of walk around my home or just want to carry it with me and that kind of stuff. So I don't really use it anymore for working because I find that the MacBook Air does pretty much 99% of all the things that I want to do. And so I only use my iPad now as a consumption device rather than a working device. And like all the notifications on there are also turned off because I only mostly use it for watching content and reading content. So there's not that much stuff going on there. So I'm keeping it relatively simple, but I can see how if I upgrade to Monterey, like when we're podcasting right now, I could see how maybe I would allow notifications to come in from like Zoom and from like, Audio Hijack Pro, which is like some of the apps we use to run in the background to make sure that things are running smoothly so that, I still get to see them as we're recording this, but that I don't get to see everything else. For very much of a working context, if you use the device for working, I can see focus mode being helpful. But if you're not using it for working, then I think you can get away with D&D for the most part.
Jacomo in the live stream gives a good reminder that another thing you can do with automations, and again, this is like next level stuff, but want to introduce it to you, is you can use NFC tags to start and stop automations, which could then, of course, trigger different focus modes. So you could even have, these NFC tags are these like sticker type things that you can buy on Amazon or AliExpress or wherever, and you can tie them to different automations on your iOS device. And so all you need to do is tap your phone to something like when you come in a room, or some people I know have NFC tags on their desk to enable different automations and stuff like that. That's going next level, but you can do things just by tapping your phone on a sticker or something like that. So give some thought to ways that might work in your life. For me personally, I have, for example, my podcast focus mode, which I talked about earlier. The way I do it right now is it automatically starts and stops during our regular podcast recording time, because we are generally consistent. Of course, that doesn't work when we do record at different times, which we do sometimes. So right now I manually kick it off. But like you said, I'm thinking maybe when I upgrade to Monterey, which I haven't yet, what I might do is tie it to starting up my podcast recording software or something like that. So it just automatically does everything it needs to do once that software is started, something like that. And looking at my phone right now, I can see that indeed my podcast focus mode is on, which is great. So yeah, you could also do things like if you work from home, like, and this is theoretical, of course, you could have like a nap focus mode that goes for however long and then blocks out everything except maybe messages from your boss or Slack or something like that, but blocks everything else out. So if you did need to get up, you could. So that's another example of something you could have automatically set up. So Tan, we've given a lot of focus mode tips. You've played a little bit of the devil's advocate, but it sounds like you can see the power of it. You're not totally into it yet, but maybe once it's available on the computer, you might go deeper into it. I think the important thing to remember is that you kind of need to know yourself. If you're somebody who can't totally turn off certain notifications, but you want it to be specific to times that they are appropriate, then focus modes could be for that. Or if you're somebody who does like setting up different things, that's something that might work for you. Otherwise, the more simple you can make it, the better. If people were going to take this episode, maybe they've heard of focus mode, or maybe this is an introduction and we want to give them like some sort of actionable next step, what should people do?
Yeah, I think everyone should at least explore it, right? And figure out if this is right for you. So what I would recommend you do now is to set up your work and personal focus mode, and then just play around with those two settings. Try to set it up, see what works for you, try it out for a few days, and maybe you'll really like it, or maybe you go, hey, you know what, this is not for me, but at least you got to check it out. So definitely recommend set up the work and personal focus mode right after this episode. And if you want to find everything that we've talked about today and all the links, you can go to our show notes, and they can be found at theproductivityshow.com/377. So I want to thank everyone for listening to today's episode, and we'll see you next Productive Monday.